Hi. The first three videos in this series of four talked about how to fly in the rather quirky UK airspace, VFR and IFR. This fourth video covers paperwork and procedures. In many ways, we operate with very little interference from the state. Particularly with respect to entry and exit requirements, we are one of the least regulated countries I know. If we have the permission of the landowner or airfield, we can come and go as we please in IFR or VFR. We have no requirement for anyone to be on the ground to see us in or out. So let's start with that permission. Most airfields and farmers' strips require permission for each movement, called PPR or prior permission required, and occasionally PNR for prior notice required. Some require a phone call or email, some have forms on their websites. I would work on the assumption that everywhere you go will expect to be asked in advance. This is partly to ensure that they have room for you, and partly to ensure that they've briefed you on local circumstances, like noise-sensitive neighbours or runway conditions. Some airfields have strict opening hours with no movements outside those hours. Others will allow you to land and take off whenever you please, but usually only if you have signed some kind of out-of-hours disclaimer or agreement in advance. All this stuff is probably on their website, but nothing beats picking up the phone and chatting if your English is good enough. In that phone call, it's worth checking fuel availability and what form of payment they accept for fuel. Generally, credit cards are acceptable. Relatively few are limited to fuel carnets, though there are some. It's also very worth checking fuel prices. For example, prices in Scotland, especially on the islands, can be eye-wateringly expensive, more than double the cost in England. If you're flying to the islands then home, it's very worthwhile to pick up fuel somewhere like Kirkbride on the way in and out to save a lot of money. To focus your attention, to fill my aircraft in the most expensive place I go to regularly, Islay, costs over €3,000 more than the cheapest Guernsey. Do that a few times and that starts to represent real money. Another way you can save money is by submitting a fuel drawback claim after you leave the UK. The government will refund duty, but not VAT, paid on fuel bought during your visit to the UK, up to a maximum of the fuel capacity of the aircraft. This is currently 37 pence per litre for avgas, so worth filling out the form. On my aircraft, it's worth over €300 every time I leave the UK. You can claim up to 2 years after the flight. It's normally paid into a UK bank account, and I don't know what happens if you don't have one, but I can give you my bank details if you can't think of anywhere else. You apply by filling in the HO60 form found on the UK government website. That's Hotel Oscar 60. You may notice that there are very few uncontrolled aerodromes in the UK with instrument approach procedures. This is mainly due to the high costs and compliance requirements, making them difficult for smaller aerodromes to obtain. Those that do exist usually require PPR and a designated arrival time. Simply filing an IFR flight plan does not fulfill this requirement. Unfortunately, there is inconsistency in the procedures and restrictions for IAPs at uncontrolled aerodromes, so check in advance with the destination when making the PPR request. If VMC conditions are anticipated, it's probably easier just to make a visual approach. If you need to break cloud, by all means make use of the initial and intermediate elements of the IAP, subject to remaining clear of any local airspace hazards. You'll be in Class G airspace and within reason can do as you wish, but you need to be aware of other airspace users and that being on an uncontrolled instrument approach procedure affords no particular priority over other traffic. If making an instrument approach to an uncontrolled aerodrome, you should also review the VFR charts for the surrounding area. If conditions are IMC and you're making an approach at an uncontrolled aerodrome, comply with any local procedures such as radio calls on the approach. Most licensed airfields expect you to wear yellow jackets, but some smaller airfields consider it a bit silly, so have one with you and be ready to put it on or take it off according to what you see around you. The UK has never been part of the Schengen Agreement, so there have always been immigration requirements to enter and leave the country. But since Brexit, we've also left the customs union, meaning you now need to meet both immigration and customs requirements. Though not strictly a UK thing, Do remember that EU rules mean that you probably need to leave and re-enter the EU and Schengen area at a port of entry, and probably complete a GAR before departure and return. Luckily, unlike in the rest of Europe, we and you are allowed to enter and leave the UK from almost anywhere, even some farmers' fields. All the farmer has to do is apply to the authority called Border Force for permission, and then they become a port of entry or exit. You can check with them when you get PPR. Border Force staff are dual trained for both immigration and customs. You do, however, have to fill in a GAR, a General Aviation Report, 2 hours before you depart in either direction. This can be done through a number of commercial sites, such as Autorouter, but my recommendation is to use the government site, Submit a General Aviation Report. You need to register in advance, but then can submit a form before departure. Although Northern Ireland is part of the UK, because of its history with terrorism, you must also submit a GAR 12 hours in advance if you're travelling between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, except from police-designated airfields. To find out whether the airfields you intend to use are designated, I would call them. I'm not that convinced that the list published online is accurate, as it includes airports which have been closed for many years. Finally, let me just remind you of the licensing position. You need a PPL, CPL, or ATPL to fly here with a Class 1 or Class 2 medical. You can't use an EASA LAPL. If you're a UK resident, you need a UK license and ratings, but then you're probably not watching this video. If you have an EASA IR, it's valid on EASA registered aircraft. But if you have an EASA BIR, you can't use it here. You can't fly a UK registered aircraft with only EASA Part FCL license. You can fly NREG aircraft with an FAA license in the UK. I think that's it for these videos. The CAA's Skyway Code is an excellent, simple but comprehensive document which goes into much more detail than I can here. And the Airspace and Safety Initiative has many helpful articles, both about flying in the UK in general and also highlighting particular issues and hotspots. Links to both can be found below. Please come to the UK. You'll find us hospitable and welcoming. It's different, and that difference can add to the interest of your trip. See you in the next video.